Christian Parker. All right. So Christian Parker has not been one of my favorite candidates. You guys know I've talked about, I think everybody wants Brian Flores. Now, is it realistic? Probably not, right? He'll probably end up getting a head coaching job or go back to Minnesota, but he is technically a free agent. So the Packers could open up the checkbook if they want to. But Christian Parker's one that he was very young the last time they interviewed for him, right? Yeah, that was one thing that stood out to me. He was mentioned as an up and coming, assistant coach, if you will. He's a guy who already spent time in Green Bay. You could tell that Matt LaFleur has an admiration for him. And then he went on to the Eagles after the Packers decided to hire Jeff Hafley. So he's been with the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I didn't mention Christian Parker on our list of 15 yesterday because I really, really, really wanted to zero in on the top 3 defenses in the league. Philadelphia Eagles defense is not bad. They are a solid defense this year, okay? What I wanted to do was kind of key in on the top 3, and now you're going to see some of these other candidates that are going to get interviewed, right, that are probably outside of that top 3. In some cases, maybe outside of the top 10, and it's easy to go, okay, why would you go after a coach like that? Well, we kind of felt the same way about Jeff Hafley. You look at Jeff Hafley's number at Boston College, and the defense was just meh, right? You go back to when he was in the National Football League, he was with the 49ers, but he had never been a defensive coordinator, right? He had never called plays at the NFL level. The only play calling experience that we seen was he was co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State one year, and there were rumors out there that he actually called the plays and the other defensive coordinator, had other responsibilities. So, when you hear someone like Christian Parker that might potentially be the next DC, it's easy to get a little bit like, okay, why are we hiring this guy? But everyone felt the same way about Jeff Hafley. Great mind. People like Richard Sherman loved Jeff Hafley, right? They thought he could be a great coach. But I don't think anybody was coming into that hiring cycle going, Jeff Hafley's my number one choice, until it was mentioned he was interviewed, and all of a sudden, bang, they had their guy. And it felt like the Packers moved pretty quick on Jeff Hafley. So let's dive into it. To the best of my knowledge, Jordan Schultz broke the report. If you guys know someone who got it earlier, mention it in the chat. I don't want to cut anybody out of getting credit for reporting on the news. We always have 73 insiders reporting the same thing within 30 seconds of each other. But Jordan Schultz, sources, the Packers will interview Eagles DB coach and pass game coordinator, very important there, Christian Parker, for their vacant defensive coordinator job after Jeff Hafley took the Dolphins head coaching position. Parker, a rising star in the coaching ranks, flies to Dallas tomorrow to interview with the Cowboys. Okay, so he is going to be interviewing with the Cowboys today. Some people are going, there's no chance the Packers will get him. They won't let him out of the building in Dallas. I don't know, man. They've already, it's funny, when Dallas interviewed DeMarcus Covington or set that interview up, whether it's already taken place or not, people said the same thing there. Oh, now we lost DeMarcus Covington. Just because they interview doesn't mean they're going to get hired. And I can't imagine Christian Parker, unless they just absolutely blow his socks off with the compensation, right? I can't imagine he wouldn't want to explore all options, right, and get the interview out there. So, again, that is the latest news. Jordan Schultz reporting that he is, does have an interview set up with the Packers after the Dallas Cowboys interview. Now, let's talk about his background, okay? I like to go back and see, okay, did these guys play football and at what level? I think that's important, right? You want someone who's played the game, if at all possible. It's not a 100% a prerequisite for getting a coaching position, but I think it does help that you can connect with the players a little bit more. Now, he never played in the NFL, but here was his playing career, okay? From 2009 to 2012, Parker played his college football at the University of Richmond, okay? That was from 2009 to 2012. He played wide receiver and cornerback. I think that's important, you want your passing game coordinator or your pass-minded defensive coordinator, if he ends up getting the job, you want him to know what it takes to play cornerback, to play safety, positions like that. But also, if you played wide receiver at any point during your, whether it's a small career, short career, or a long career, you know what the receivers are trying to accomplish. So you can kind of reverse engineer that. I think it's important to have both receiver and cornerback experience. Same thing goes with a DB coach or a DB minded coach that maybe played defensive line or vice versa. Like DeMarcus Covington, to the best of my knowledge, he was our defensive line coach, right? To the best of my knowledge, he played wide receiver in his playing career. And then he's a defensive line coach. So just because you played one position doesn't make you more qualified or less qualified than the other. In some cases, I think it kind of gets you into the mindset of, okay, he's a defensive line coach. Well, he knows as a background as a wide receiver what the receivers are trying to do to the DBs behind them. So how can you maximize what you're doing in the defensive line to help those guys on the backside with the wide receiver mindset? All that stuff kind of comes into play, if that makes sense. Highlights, he was a member of two Colonial Athletic Association championship teams in 2009 and 2012. So a little bit of success there. Background, he originally joined the Spiders as a walk-on before earning a scholarship. He also competed in track for the university, specifically in the 4x100 meter relay. All right. So fast track guy, obviously. And I love that it says that he joined them as a walk-on and then earned a scholarship, right? That's someone that had kind of the odds stacked against him. I think that's important. High school prior to college, he played at Battlefield High School in Virginia, where he was a 2-time all-district selection at cornerback. So it sounds like he got selected for awards at cornerback as opposed to wide receiver. Let's talk about his coaching career, the more important aspect, right? From 2013 to 2018, okay, with his coaching career. Before moving to the NFL, Parker spent 6 seasons honing his craft at various collegiate levels. He was at Virginia State from 2013 through 2014. He began as a graduate assistant / cornerbacks coach before being promoted to secondary coach. So he went from just coaching the corners to coaching the corners and the safeties, and recruiting coordinator in his second year. So obviously he's got some recruiting experience. Norfolk State from 2015 to 2016, served as the defensive backs coach and recruiting coordinator there. Then he went to Notre Dame in 2017. That's a pretty big jump there from Norfolk State to Notre Dame, right? Served as the defensive analyst for the Fighting Irish team that finished the season 10-3. So this is probably where Matt LaFleur and Christian Parker have a little bit of common ground, maybe where they cross paths. They may not have been there at the same time, but obviously Matt LaFleur, I think he spent 1 or 2 years at Notre Dame, I believe under Brian Kelly. I could be wrong there, but I think so. That's probably the ties in that situation. Texas A&M in 2018, he served as the defensive analyst on Jimbo Fisher's inaugural staff as well. Now let's talk about him moving to the NFL. Christian Parker moves to the NFL. His NFL ascent has been remarkably rapid. Okay. And this is what you're looking for. You know, we talk about, you're going to get a ton of draft coverage on the channel here in the coming weeks. Actually, the board will start being put together tonight at a different level. So we're going to update that for you guys, and you'll have updated grades in that regard. But we always talk about players, prospects, right? Coming into the league. You want a player that's ascending into the league. You know what I'm saying? Like, you want a player that's shown progress every year in college and is playing his best ball coming in the league. It doesn't mean that if someone has a step back, you're not interested in him. Like Jaden Reed took a step back his final year in college. The year before, he was a stud, took a slight step back, and then he hits the league, the National Football League, rebounds, and he's off and running. So it's not like, okay, that's going to completely cancel someone out. But a best case scenario, or perfect scenario, in my opinion, is a player that just continues to improve on his way into the NFL. Same thing goes for coaches, right? So he's kind of made this rapid ascent as one of the youngest and most effective position coaches in the league. So he broke into the National Football League with the Green Bay Packers in 2019 and 2020. In his first NFL stint, he served as the defensive quality control coach under Mike Pettin. Okay, so Matt LaFleur comes in 2019, and you have our boy Christian Parker comes in as a defensive quality control coach under Mike Pettin. He notably worked with Jair Alexander during his 2020 All-Pro season. So you start to tie things together. Now, I understand different portions of the fan base looks at this different, right? What they'll do, like we mentioned Jim Leonhard, man, look at what he did with that secondary in Denver. And a portion of the fan base will come at you and go, oh, he didn't do anything special. He's got Patrick Surtain. He didn't do anything there. If he didn't have Patrick Surtain, they wouldn't have been that good. Okay, cool. So he gets no credit for helping Patrick Surtain have an all-pro season, or actually, yeah, all-pro. And I think he won the AP Defensive Player of the Year award this year. He gets no credit for that. He had nothing to do. It's just like with Jordan Love. You know, fire Matt LaFleur. Well, he's got Jordan Love. Can somebody remind me who hand-molded Jordan Love into the quarterback that he is at the NFL level? Same thing with Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers. It's like we want to fire them and not give them any credit for the superstars they have when you actually seen that coach help that superstar peak, right? I don't know. I just think it's important to mention that stuff. So the fact that he worked with Jair Alexander in the 2020 All-Pro season, I think that's huge. He moved on to Denver in 2021. He served as the defensive backs coach. He mentored stars like Pat Surtain II and Justin Simmons. In 2022, his secondary helped the Broncos finish 7th in the league in yards allowed. So he's got some ties to Pat Surtain as well, or a little bit earlier, obviously, than Jim Leonhard arriving there. And then most recently, the Philadelphia Eagles came calling. And in 2024, they hired him last year. He currently was the passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach. All right. Christian Parker helped lead the Eagles to a Super Bowl victory in February of 2025. Under his guidance, the 2024 secondary finished with the league's fewest yards allowed per game and the top passing defense. So again, he's the passing game coordinator. Last year when they won the Super Bowl, he was the passing game coordinator. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. Now you're asking yourself, okay, so who does he work under there? It's Vic Fangio. Yeah, that name gets brought back up again. You guys remember the Fangio defense was all the rage, right? That's why we went and got Joe Barry to run the Fangio defense. And then things kind of shifted a little bit, and everybody caught on to the Fangio defense other than Vic Fangio. And now all of a sudden, the Fangio defense is back on the rise again, okay? The league is very cyclical, and I think people have a big misconception. Even when Joe Barry was here, Fangio is supposed to be quarters match, right? At its root. It doesn't mean you don't run other defenses. Well, what happened? By the time we were ready to run Joe Barry off, we had switched to middle field close the majority of the time, right? So it actually turned into a middle field close defense. That's not the Fangio defense. That's not a quarters match, cover 6 match, cover 9 match, cover set, all that. It's, again, you've got to evolve with the personnel you got and the direction the league's going, but it will come back around, right? That's why you're seeing more 12 and 21 personnel in the league now, because that's coming back around, because defense are building to stop 11 personnel. Well, now offenses are going, you know what? Let's force them in their base defense and let's attack that way. So let's talk about what the Eagles ranking looked like, and then we'll talk about what they specifically ran, okay? And we'll be real quick with this. I don't want to go too long with this segment. So Philadelphia Eagles defensive rankings, scoring, okay? Their scoring defense, points per play allowed, they finished 4th in the league at .306. The only defenses ranked higher than them was Denver, Houston, and Seattle, okay? So, again, 4th in scoring defense. The Packers finished 10th. So, let's say all things are equal, and we know they're not, but just for conversation purposes, let's say all things are equal here. And okay, we're going to get the result that Philadelphia got because we bring in Christian Parker compared to what Jeff Hafley did this year. Well, we just improved to 4th. Now, will that happen? Probably not. Will it? Will Green Bay or will Jeff Hafley go to Miami and have the 10th best defense? I wouldn't be surprised if he don't. Things change, right? You got to adjust on the fly. We know now, if you look at this second column number here with Green Bay scoring defense, the last 3 games of the season, they were actually at .409. That would put them in the bottom third if you were to compare that to the 2025 column, right? Now, Philadelphia, what did they do down the stretch? Their last 3 games, and this is of the regular season, mind you, they were .306 all season long. The last 3 games, they actually got slightly better at .304 points per play allowed. So they were improving. However, their last game, .397. So you can kind of see how, recently how they have performed. And again, it doesn't mean just because their last game was worse than both of their last 3 in their 2025 average, it doesn't mean that Christian Parker will be a horrible DC and that's going to continue that trend. No, you're constantly making adjustments. But again, overall 2025, Philadelphia finished 4th in scoring defense. Total defense, yards per play allowed, okay? So every time an offense runs a play, this is how many yards they typically give up on defense. Philadelphia finished 8th, actually tied for 7th, I apologize, with New England, who are obviously going to the AFC Championship here. 5 yards per play allowed, okay, is what they had. Green Bay, the same exact number. So you got a chance to maybe get a little bit better in scoring defense, stay the same total defensive yards per play. If Christian Parker can do what Vic Fangio is doing in Philadelphia. All right, passing defense, okay, yards per pass attempt allowed, they finished 9th. Green Bay, right there, the same exact number at 6.1 yards per pass attempt allowed. So you've got neck and neck right there, Philadelphia, Green Bay. And you can kind of see why I was digging through the coaching staff at Seattle, Denver, and Houston, right? Those are the top 3 defenses in every statistical category. It's wild, okay? Run defense. Well, how did they run? Okay, well, Clayton, he was a secondary coach. Does he really get credit? Do the safeties, remind me, do the safeties help play the run? Well, he's a passing game coordinator. That stuff has got to be completely lockstep together. The run game coordinator and the pass game coordinator have got to make sure that they're not playing too far off tilt to put themselves in a vulnerable spot, to put the offense in an advantageous situation, because they don't understand, all right, we might not want to play quarters when they're firing the wheel, right? We may not want to play cover 6 if they're on the 2 side. They want to bring pressure off the 2 side, right? You got to make sure the run fits line up. You got to make sure everything is very, very cohesive in that regard. So, yeah, I do think it matters. So Philly, again, in run defense, they finished tied for 11th with Green Bay at 4.2 yards per rush allowed on the season. Now, you notice down the stretch, Green Bay got really bad, 4.8 yards per rush allowed. But our run defense started to collapse as the injuries continued to pile up. And then Philadelphia's actually got better. On the year, 4.2, their last 3 games, it improved to only 3.4. If you took that 3.4 and put it in the 2025 column over here, that would actually be a league best in terms of overall with 2025, if that makes sense. It doesn't mean that the last 3 for other teams like Houston, 3.1. New Orleans had a really good defense, surprisingly. So, all right, takeaways. This is an important stat. You won't find Green Bay on this list because I want to say we were right in the bottom 3 or bottom 5 in takeaways. It was horrible. We just could not take the football away, right? Philadelphia actually tied for 10th best in takeaways, all right? They were averaging 1.3 takeaways per game. So when you look at the other defenses, Houston was number 1 at 1.8. Jacksonville, our boy Anthony Campanelli, was at 1.8, so he was tied for first with Houston. Chicago was tied for third with 1.7 with Pittsburgh. And then you had the LA Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. So you could kind of see some of those top defenses we were just talking about and where they rank. But again, Philadelphia, Christian Parker's crew, he was the passing game coordinator for Philadelphia once again. They were averaging 1.3 takeaways per game. Obviously, that's interceptions and that's forced fumbles, recovered fumbles, that type of thing. All right. So that's how that falls into place. Now, one last thing. What does their coverage scheme look like in Philadelphia? Predominantly, now, again, when you think about Vic Fangio, what do you think about, gang? You always think about quarters match, right? Again, quarters match is 4 deep with match principles, right? It's if and then. There's assignments on each individual call. If you look at it from Nick Saban's perspective in Alabama, they call it triangle and box, okay? And what that means is you always want to stay +1 in the hat count on your coverage. If it's a 2 receiver set on one side, you want to form a triangle around him, okay? And there's match principles involved at the break, at the stem, in a perfect world, a perfect scenario, you want to have him in between both receivers, in between 3 defenders, with someone looking to match him downfield, right? Like if it's a dub set in a 2x2 set, right? The safety in the corner, what they'll probably be is what we call mod, or there might be a little bit more advanced match coverage, where if they go vertical, if they break a threshold of 7 or 8 yards, then it now becomes man coverage. It might be a 12-yard threshold on a 3rd and long call, right? But what it means is if the 2 goes vert, the safety now becomes man coverage, right? That's kind of the root of the Fangio scheme. Now, let's see how much cover 4 they played here, all right? And let's see how much man coverage they played as well. And listen, understand, whoever's charting these numbers, they may not have it right? Like they may miss 1 or 2, but I think this is a good collection of data. So when you look at what the Eagles did this year, first of all, EPA per dropback, they were tied for 4th best in the league at negative 0.05 EPA per dropback. Where's Green Bay? Glad you asked. We actually finished this year a positive 0.12. So we were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10th worst pass defense in the league in terms of EPA per dropback. Not yards per pass attempt, EPA per dropback, all right? And again, I think it's an important metric. So the Eagles finishing tied for 4th, that's a nice number. What did they run, all right? What they ran, the majority of the time was a cover 3. So they were in 29% of their defensive plays, they played cover 3 deep looks, right? Middle field closed. So how does that compare to the Packers? We ran cover 3 32% of the time this season. So you're going to see a little bit less cover 3, right? If Christian Parker carries over exactly what he did there. The second most defense ran was cover one man. You guys know I'm not a big cover one man fan, 22%. Now, Green Bay only ran it 15% of the time this year. However, when you look at the stats throughout the wild card round, in the wild card round against the Bears, I think we played man coverage 25% of the time, if I've seen that stat right. You guys do your own research. I seen that come up on the Twitter timeline. I was like, damn, ain't no wonder they collapsed in the second half. We were playing so much man. So, again, 22% man was the second call that they made. Cover one man, that is. And cover one, man coverage across the board, one deep post safety. Okay. Middle field closed, same as cover three, man coverage underneath with a 4-man rush. Cover one man you can also fire a blitz there and it be cover one man like a green dog, where if the running back's staying in, okay, if that's your man, go ahead and blitz unless he leaks off into the route. He's still your responsibility. All right. So the third most defense they ran in terms of coverage, cover six, 21% of the snaps. Guys, notice they ran cover six more than anybody else in the league other than Jacksonville. Timeout. Jacksonville. Anthony Campanile, our linebacker coach last year. What did we run the majority of the time last year? We talked about it, right? Maybe not the majority, but we ran a more healthier approach to cover six last year. That was the bread and butter of the Jeff Hafley defense. We kind of got away from it this year, I believe. Packers, 16% cover six defense. So I'm going to tell you what this tells me. When Matt LaFleur is looking to make a slight adjustment, I think we'd all agree, we wish the defense had been better, especially down the stretch. We gave up a lot of points. Looks like Matt might be wanting to dip back into cover six. I love it. Now, cover six, Clayton, is that zone. You can run a cover six spot drop, but I'm talking about 90% of the time when you play cover six, it's zone match. What does that mean? Quarters match principles. Fangio, the root of Fangio's scheme, principles, but you're in a cover six. What's a cover six? A cover four is exactly what it sounds like. 4 deep defenders, okay? 4 deep, all with quarter responsibility. Their responsibility is a quarter of the field, okay? So deep quarter, middle quarter, deep outside quarter, okay? Cover six is what we some people will call it a 2x4. Some people will call it cover six, right? Some people will call it quarter halves or half quarter, all right? What it means is half of the field is cover two, the other half is cover four. 2 plus 4 equals 6. That's why they call it a cover six defense. So what you'll do with the cover six typically is the strong side of the formation. If you're in a trips or a tray set, you'll play the quarters to that side and the half to the other. Why? Because you want to make sure if they've got 3 defenders, you've got the box technique that Saban talks about, right? And again, you can play poach, you can play buzz, you can play a lot of different versions of a cover 4 match, or in this case, a cover 6, but that's just kind of at the root of the defense. Again, cover 6 is what they ran the majority of the time, not the majority of the time. They ran it third most this year in Philadelphia, but it was tied for the most in the league. Now, Campanile went down to Jacksonville and they had great success, right? I mean, you look at their EPA per drop back, they're just behind the Philadelphia Eagles. So Campanile continued to run cover 6 in Jacksonville. And for whatever reason, Jeff Hafley got away from cover 6 a little bit and played a little bit more cover 3 at 32%. You see what I'm saying? So you went down to 16% cover 6. Let me double check something real quick. I just want to make sure, see how much cover 6 we ran. You can see last year our EPA was actually minus 0.02. It's showing we only ran 12% cover 6 last year, which is really, really interesting. But we played way more cover 2. Cover 6 is way closer to cover 2 than cover 3. Obviously, with a cover 2 defense, what we like to run was a Tampa 2 modification. We'd also run a lot of what we call invert 2, where instead of having the safeties cover deep half, you would have a cornerback drop and cover half with the safety buzz the box and play the underneath zone. And on the other side, you would have your traditional safety playing deep half. So last year, it seems like the Packers played a little more, way more cover 2. Or we played way more cover 2 last year than we did this year. Because what we're showing here is the Packers only played cover 2 18% of the time this year. So really, we got into cover 3 a little too much. And in my opinion, went down the stretch, you got into too much man. Obviously, the numbers aren't going to reflect here from the playoffs. That's how you got cooked against Chicago. So what can we expect schematically from Christian Parker, right? What can we expect from Christian Parker? Probably going to see a lot more cover 6. And I love it because McKinney is built for cover 6. Now, you've got athletic linebackers where you could cover the seam if you want to dip into Tampa 2. The Eagles played cover 2 defense, though, only 3% of the time this year. So you're going to see way less cover 2, and you're going to see way more cover 6 if indeed Christian Parker, and I imagine he would because he was the passing game coordinator, brings that same mentality, that same mindset to Green Bay. It's interesting, too, the thing to keep an eye on if he does get this job, and again, we're not saying he's a slam dunk to get this job. It's just a name that gets brought up again, and he's the first interview they called for. Very interesting, right? I don't think that's a coincidence. If you go with Christian Parker this year and they decide, all right, he's our defensive coordinator, the thing I want to watch the most is who really shined in Philadelphia the last 2 years. Cooper DeJean, right, the rookie, nickelback. Who's our nickelback? Javon Bullard. I would not be surprised. As a matter of fact, I'd be just about willing to put a little money on some kind of unique wager that Javon Bullard, if Christian Parker comes to the Packers and the way they play cover 6, the way Cooper DeJean has kind of excelled in that nickelback role. Obviously, he plays cornerback, and I think he played a little bit of safety too when they're in their base sets. But wouldn't be surprised if you see Javon Bullard take a spike, a little jump, kind of how Cooper DeJean has played really, really well at the league. So I look for commonalities like that when you're switching DCs, when you're switching and bringing in new guys. Again, I want to, as we wrap this up, I'm not saying that Christian Parker is going to be your next DC. There's going to be somebody say, hey, you never hire him, never hire him. That's cool. If that's how you feel, that's awesome. What we're going to do is every interview that we hear, we're going to try to find the time to do these breakdowns and give you an idea of who's going to be stepping in, who you would potentially be getting. That way we can have a conversation about it as Packer fans along the way and whether or not you like Christian Parker. So if you're watching this video back later, let me know in the comments, how do you feel about Christian Parker? Is that the guy you want as your DC? Is there somebody else you would like more? Where would he rank? Is he your top choice? Is he top 3, top 5? Maybe he's not even in your top 10. Let us know in the comments what you think about Christian Parker. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you know when we go live here in the future.